Russian forces have launched a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine as President Vladimir Putin demanded Kiev's army lay down its weapons. As Russia threatens the largest land invasion in Europe since World War II, the most consequential strategic question of the 21st century is becoming clear. In this video, we will tell you about World War III, what will happen if NATO attacks Russia. Number 9. What has Vladimir Putin ordered? The Russian president has recognized the independence of two Russian-controlled territories in East Ukraine. They call themselves the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. The territories have been armed, financed, and politically controlled by Russia since 2014. But until this week, Russia still recognized them as part of Ukraine. Putin has also sent his military on a peacekeeping mission to Ukraine, meaning that Russia will formally occupy sovereign Ukraine territory for a second time following the 2014 annexation of Crimea. But in this case, Russia has not annexed the territories. A document signed by Putin on Monday also allows him to establish military bases or place missiles in the territories. Number 8. Why is he targeting Ukraine? First, Putin has indicated that he questions Ukraine's right to statehood, calling modern Ukraine an artificial construct of the Soviet Union. He also sees Russians and Ukrainians as one people. Second, he thinks that a Western-leaning Ukraine is dangerous for Russia. He has called the possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine a red line for the Kremlin. Third, he wants to show that popular revolutions, such as the one that took place in Kiev in 2014, do not succeed in the long run. Number 7. What might happen next? The decision marks the end of the Minsk peace deal, a troubled roadmap out of the conflict that would have left the territories in Ukraine. That deal also contained a ceasefire agreement, which is now also void. More than 14,000 people have died in the fighting that has occurred since 2014. Russia's military is likely to make a formal entrance into the territories soon. Its troops and military vehicles have secretly taken part in the fighting since 2014. But this deployment will probably be much larger. Moscow will now threaten Ukraine with a broader war if it continues to fight against the separatists, telling Kiev that Russia is now obliged by treaty to defend them from attack. Russia could also justify a further invasion of Ukraine by recognizing the territorial claims of the two separatist governments. They include the large city of Mariupol, which is on the other side of the front lines. If Russia recognizes their expanded borders, it may order its troops to begin an offensive against the Ukrainian army. That could be a prelude to a broader conflict. Number 6. What will the West do? Western countries have condemned the threat and are likely to impose sanctions on Moscow this week. But the severity of the punishment will be up for debate. And they have made clear that they will not send combat troops to Ukraine. The U.S. had promised the mother of all sanctions, probably targeting Russia's banking and financial sectors if Russia invaded Ukraine. But that imagined a blitzkrieg-style ground campaign that could take big cities like Kiev and Kharkiv. The recognition of territories and occupation by Russian forces is also an act of aggression, but it is not the nightmare scenario. As diplomats met in Brussels on Tuesday, it remained unclear whether Putin's order to send troops into Ukraine would be the trigger for the massive sanctions the EU has been threatening for weeks. Number 5. Will NATO come to Ukraine's defense? Not militarily. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and the alliance is not treaty-bound to defend it. U.S. President Joe Biden said he will not send American or allied troops to fight Russia in Ukraine. However, Kiev is a close partner and was promised eventual membership of the alliance at a NATO summit in 2008. For the moment, the 30-member North Atlantic Treaty Organization is working with Ukraine to modernize its armed forces. Canada operates a training program in Ukraine, while Denmark is also stepping up efforts to bring Ukraine's military up to NATO standards. The alliance has also said it will help Ukraine defend against cyber attacks and is providing secure communications equipment for military command. Number 4. What about arming Ukraine? The United States, Britain, and the Baltic states are sending weapons to Ukraine, including anti-tank missiles, small arms, and boats. Turkey has sold drones to Ukraine that the Ukrainian military has used in eastern Ukraine against Russian-backed separatists. However, Germany is against sending arms to Ukraine. Berlin has instead promised a complete field hospital and the necessary training for Ukrainian troops to operate it, worth about $6 million. Number 3. So why is NATO putting forces on standby? The alliance is concerned about a potential spillover from any conflict between Russia and Ukraine, particularly in the Black Sea region, where Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, and in the Baltic Sea. The U.S. Department of Defense has put about 8,500 American troops on heightened alert. Denmark is sending a frigate to the Baltic Sea and 4 F-16 warplanes to Lithuania. Spain has sent a minesweeper and a frigate to join NATO naval forces in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Madrid is also considering sending fighter jets to Bulgaria, while the Netherlands has also offered 2 F-35 warplanes to Bulgaria from April. France may send troops to Romania under NATO command. Number 2. Pentagon leaders warn of a horrific aftermath. The Pentagon's top officials warned Friday that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would result in a horrific aftermath. Joint Chiefs Chairman Army General Mark Milley and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin detailed the grim scenario as U.S. and NATO forces prepare for a potential Moscow attack on its ex-Soviet neighbor. Milley said, given the type of forces that are arrayed, the ground maneuver forces, the artillery, the ballistic missiles, the air forces, all of it packaged together, if it was unleashed on Ukraine, it would be significant, very significant, and it would result in a significant amount of casualties. And you can imagine what that might look like in dense urban areas, all along roads, and so on and so forth. Milley, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, added it would be horrific. The Pentagon's warnings came as Russian President Vladimir Putin reviews U.S. diplomatic and security proposals that were hand-delivered by John Sullivan, the American ambassador to Russia. Russia initially offered a chilly response to the proposals, so we will await what the Russian government's reaction and assessment is to our written responses, Sullivan told reporters on Friday from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. And then, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken noted, I would expect there would be a discussion or perhaps a meeting, but I don't know that hasn't been agreed to. Milley said that Russia's posture along Ukraine's border was unlike anything he had seen during his 4-decade military career. He said the Russians have deployed air forces, naval forces, special forces, cyber-electronic warfare, command and control, logistics engineers, and other capabilities along Ukraine's border. I would think you'd have to go back quite a while into the Cold War days to see something of this magnitude, Milley said, adding that the deployment of over 100,000 Russian troops to the border was larger than anything we've seen in recent memory. Austin called on Moscow to de-escalate tensions by removing Russian troops and military equipment from its shared border. Conflict is not inevitable. Number 1. NATO alliance. Russia has also demanded that the U.S. shall not establish military bases in the territories of any former Soviet states that are not already members of NATO, or use their infrastructure for any military activities or develop bilateral military cooperation with them. The U.S. and NATO have said that such a request cannot be accommodated. Since 2002, Kiev has sought entry into NATO, the world's most powerful military alliance. While President Joe Biden has not committed to sending U.S. combat troops to Ukraine, American forces could deploy to neighboring NATO member countries. In addition to sharing a border with Russia and Belarus, Ukraine is bordered by 4 NATO countries. We are ready, capable, and prepared to uphold our obligation under treaty to NATO, Milley said, evoking the group's Article 5 clause, an attack against one NATO ally is an attack against all NATO. Earlier this week, Biden told reporters that a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine would radically alter European security. If he were to move in with all those forces, it'd be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world, Biden said. Biden spoke with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Thursday, the second call this month, to reaffirm Washington's commitment to respond decisively if Russia further invades Ukraine. The president also told Zelensky that the U.S. Embassy in Kiev remains open and fully operational after the State Department issued an order for eligible family members of personnel at its embassy in Kiev to leave. The State Department also recommended on Sunday that all U.S. citizens in Ukraine depart the country immediately, citing Russia's continued military buildup on the border. Do let us know in the comments what you think of this matter. What will be the aftermath of Russian attack? Thanks for watching.